كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله.
إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Good morning, everybody. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. You're here with Abdul Kabir Muhammad with Black Owner Control, where we will be, inshallah, taking proactive action, where we will become proactive in creating our own nation state by mass migration to the Atlanta, Georgia area. There, we'll create a major majority. Inshallah, we'll win. We'll create a voting bloc, and we will win local elections, and uh, establish. Um, we will establish um, redistribution of resources for our own good to serve our own purpose. Today, we have a good topic. It is about how Black people got in the predicament that we are in today. And I want to blockbuster the myth that Black people have just done this to themselves, and that we're not educated enough, and that we don't work hard enough, and that we don't save up enough money in order to get ourselves out of the predicament that we're in, the economic disparity, the abject poverty, and just suffering all the way around the board. Y'all know the story. Y'all watch the news. Y'all live it. So I want to dispel that with this video, and I also want to destroy. I also want to actually just completely obliterate that myth, and I want to activate the activists in each one of us because we believe that everything is okay, and it's not okay. We are not okay. We believe that we are free, and we are not free. We can't see it because we're in the history, and we have never had a part in the structure of this country. We have never had a part. We have never had a say. So we have a slave survival mentality that has kicked in, and it's been passed since the inception of this country and us being here. And we passed it. Our ancestors passed it down to us, and it was just perpetuated generation to generation. We each put it in our children, and we raise our children up with this whole survival thing, this whole survival mentality where we got to have something. We just got to make sure we have some type of shack that we can sleep up under. We got to have some kind of rags that we can throw on our body to cover up our dignity, and we got to find some scraps to eat for the day. That's as far as Black mentality goes. I don't care if it's from the top, from the richest Black person all the way down to the poorest Black person. This is the frame. This is the mental framework that we have to work with, and it's because it's an offshoot of slavery. So I compiled a list of everything that was forcefully done to us, um, and unfortunately and unrightfully done to us via slavery and via systemic racism in this country, in every single generation of the existence of Black people. So I'm gonna jump straight in. So the first thing, the transatlantic slave trade. We know what that's about. We don't have to go too deep into it. Y'all know what chattel slavery was about. We had 240 years of that. That's a no-brainer. So that's just basically, just imagine if you lived to be 240 years old and you worked 80% of that time and you got 0% of the money from everything that you did. That's just basically like you going to your work, your job every single day, and you're not getting one penny back from all of the hard work that you're doing. And on top of that, you've been forced to do the work that you have to do. You've been forced to do it. We're willingly going to work and then giving our money away. Now, back then in chattel slavery, y'all know what was going on. You were forced to produce for some other, for a plantation, for the white slave owners. You were forced to do it by death, and and torture and rape and maim. You had to. You were absolutely positively forced. So for 240 years, this went on. 240 years. And the scholars estimate that about $50 trillion was generated just in that time period. So that's the first thing. Black people are 240 years behind socially, economically, and educationally. We have absolutely positively nothing. 240 years, that's probably 5 generations. 5 generations behind by force. So how can we catch up? And then on top of that, we got a $50 trillion bill. The white people have a $50 trillion debt. We have a $50 trillion bill that we've been trying to pay off with peanuts. We already behind. That's the first thing. Second, once Abraham Lincoln decided to quote unquote free us, Andrew Johnson stepped in after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated and established the Emancipation Proclamation, where slaves were only free in the South, but they were not free in the North. So I'm not grateful to our great president, Abraham Lincoln. He still was a racist and a slave owner as well. And he just wanted to free slaves for his own benefit. It didn't have anything to do with the moral righteousness. Nothing to do with it whatsoever. It was a war strategy and it was a power move on behalf of him and the Republican Party in order to, keep them in power and keep them in play above the Dixiecrat/Democratic Confederate South. So once they knocked off Abraham Lincoln, they didn't have to worry about him anymore. Um, Andrew Johnson stepped in, and I think he was the 17th president. And he basically, after Abraham Lincoln gave reparations, which further pushed further that wealth gap. Once Abraham Lincoln gave slave owners a cash value of what it was that they lost from slavery, he gave them reparations, cash value. He gave slave owners reparations in that 4-year time period from 62 to 66 before he was knocked off. That pushed us even further behind, even further back. Andrew Johnson came in and reinstituted the power and ownership that the slave owners had in the Democratic Confederate South. So basically, after they were knocked off, the Confederacy was knocked off by the Union. Andrew Johnson came back and gave back all the property and everything, all the property and assets that the plantation owners had prior, and that they were that they did fight to keep prior to the Civil War. He gave it right back to them. So it was just a break. It was a tie. It was a draw. It was a break even. Andrew Johnson was a racist as well. He gave it all back to him, and as a result of that, they made a deal that they would uphold. The Republicans in the North were saying that we would win a whole lot of elections and we can sustain the power in this country if we could free black people, tip the scale, free black people, give them some rights, give them the right to vote, and then they would look at us and say, hey, we were the ones who saved you. We want to be Republicans. And that's exactly what happened. Blacks have the historical political position of black people has always been Republican because Republicans were the ones who were stepping in trying to institute us into the government, but they wanted to take us off the plantations and put us in a political slavery and subjugation. We were never actually given our own autonomy. So once he did that, the Democratic Confederacy said, we do you one better. Like we'll sign your deal, we'll make your agreement, we'll join the governments, the Confederacy and the Union. We'll join together, we join forces. Y'all do y'all thing. That's when they were the Republicans. We do our thing. That's when the racist South became Democratic, and we merged our government. So we do our thing. But as a result, they instituted black codes. If y'all don't know, which I'm sure y'all don't, y'all thought that everybody that I know, for the most part, thought slavery ended in 1862, and it did not. It was just restructured into black codes, where invented. So the plantation owners would basically give you land, give you a shack, allow you to work, and say, hey, we're going to cut you a percentage of the profits. When they ain't no longer going to beat you, you're going to come to work freely and willingly, and we're going to cut you a deal. Now, mind you, they had no choice but to cut this deal because if not, they would be labeled vagrants, and they put in the vagrancy laws. So if you didn't take the deal, that I absolutely positively, as a white slave owner, stipulate the structure of the deal. So I say, hey, out of 100% of the crops, you get 1%. And off that 1%, you have to take that 1% and feed your own self, pay your own bills inside of your shack, and pay your own property taxes, your rent for living on my plantation. So we already had nothing, first and foremost. We already had nothing. We already $50 trillion behind, plus the reparations that Abraham Lincoln gave to slave owners. He basically gave them a stimulus package to get back some of what they lost and to start back slavery again. But they just redesigned it and made it sharecropping. So they inflated the cost of living for black people to make sure and keep them locked into producing the crops that they were being enslaved to produce in the first place. And if you were labeled a vagrant, they would basically report you to the authorities at that time and say that, hey, you refuse to work, you refuse to take the deal. And since you refuse to work and you refuse to take the deal, that means that you're a fugitive, you're a criminal. And they would round you up, put you on a chain gang, and then you could be legally sold on the open market to be a slave again. Now, you didn't want to work the deal for the 1%, you're going to work for 0% again by law. And next thing you know, we got the chain gang. And there was no court proceedings. There were no lawyers representing us. We didn't have any rights. We were not even citizens. This was that went on for 30, 40, 50. Oh, let me see. That went on for almost that went on for almost a whole another generation or two. So so let's add that to the debt. So 240 years of chattel slavery, $50 trillion of debt, the reparations that Abraham Lincoln gave to the slave owners, and then the so-called Reconstruction from Andrew Johnson, where he redistributed the power back to the racist Democratic South, and to the slave owners. They took that power and redistribution of wealth and the reparations given to them by Abraham Lincoln, and created the black codes, redesigned slavery, now just made us complete and total economic slaves. And so that a period passed by. Maybe we can, let's just say for number's sake, 100 years. And my mathematicians, y'all can come and correct me or whatever. I'm just a soldier. So so when that happened, let's go to the third point. 1879, there was a mass migration of blacks to the north. Major import cities was St. Louis and where I'm from, Cincinnati, Ohio. These are the first two places you will touch when you're coming out of the South. So the Union had the industrial complex jumping off, and they needed slaves, quote unquote employees, to work in the industrial complex and mass produce all of whatever product it is that they had designed. So there was a competition. There was a competition going on between the North and the South, the Union and the Confederacy, the Republicans and the Democrats. It was a competition going on. So it was a competition of who could produce the most and who could yield more profit, which would give them more control in the government. And they were using us as a pawn. So what the mass migration did was it first weakened any thought of black people revolting, black people pooling their resources in the South, where we were slaves at and where we predominated at, it weakened it. We lost our citizens. They were migrating out of that oppression because the lynchings and the hangings, and then the forced sharecropping was taking place. We got the hell up out of there. So that was the first thing it did. It weakened any idea and any chance that we would ever have at instituting our own freedom. Because we just didn't have the numbers. We didn't have the players for the game. We were losing our players for the game. So when we got to the North, that spread us out. So now we have a micro minority of black people in the North, in the Union, which was still racist and which still voted to keep the slavery laws in the North, just not in the South. So now we back in another bad situation. So you have a micro minority, literally a handful of black folks that's in St. Louis, that's in Cincinnati, Ohio, and that's in and a lot of them went to neighboring southern states in Virginia. It was already a strong racist slave stronghold in Virginia, but Maryland, Baltimore. That's why they have significant black populations. So these three cities, Baltimore, Cincinnati, and St. Louis, have significant black populations, and this is why, amongst and amid a complete and total white world. So just imagine, and this is still to this day. This is the reason why I came up with the idea of the Black Owned and Controlled movement, where we would migrate back south, back to our roots, back to our heartlands, and back to where our people are the majority and where they are the dominant. Because even a lot of white people end up doing white flight, not only in their cities, but out of southern states. Once black people started to uh, 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 reproduce, and we were populating, and it was just getting out of control. And they was just like, what, forget it. They take their money, they trillions of dollars, and they moved to different parts of the state, and even out of the state, and even went north. And because the racist Democratic Confederacy was just politically bankrupt. That's how the North ended up taking control. And if you look at the map today, the northern states of the United States have much more money than the southern states do. Much more. And white people went and joined that bandwagon. They went and jumped and rode their wave. They went up there. It's like, you know what? We can rule this minority of blacks. We can rule them and still have technology. We can live good. We can build homes. We can build communities and so on and so forth. And still, own your slaves or own your plantation. They were giving out land. Don't forget about the Homestead Act. I forgot to put that in here, so forgive me for that. I can put it up in here. Matter of fact, let me see if I can add it to my timeline now. Excuse me, y'all. When was the Homestead Act? Okay, 1862. So this is all. Okay, I was about right on there. So this is all in that whole time frame from 66 to 77, and now we're in 79. So the Homestead Act, just to ad lib myself, was the mass redistribution of property and land in the United States. So this is another thing on top of the 250 trillion dollars that we behind. No education, no social progression, no economic progression, none of the framework that it takes to make an actual community, an actual state, city, nation, whatever. We don't have any of this. On top of that, once we were free, they played another game with us and said we're gonna pass the Homestead Act, and they passed out millions of acres. This is what got Martin Luther King killed when he exposed this about white folks. They passed out millions of acres to white folks and didn't give black people anything. Anything. Didn't give us nothing. Gave us a broken promise. General Sherman from Virginia told the people he was gonna give us 40 acres and a mule. And he went to Congress and lobbied for that. When they lobbied for that, they said, okay, we'll do it. and they never did it. Matter of fact, I think at one point they tried to do it, and then the government took it back. So this debt is accumulating. So if it was 250 trillion from slavery production all the way up, and then the Abrahamic reparations, the redistribution of power and wealth back to the racist Democratic South, and then on top of that, the Homestead Act, and then on top of that, sharecropping, we probably up to $400 million. That's a safe estimate. And any of my scholars could correct me. I would love to get the actual number. I'm sure it's in the neighborhood of $400 trillion that Black people are behind so getting back. Um, 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 we did spread out in different parts of the country, and the landscape is changing, and Black people became a micro minority in the North, where we had no rights, we had no established nothing, no established anything. We came with just the clothes we had on our back and the shoes on our feet. That's all we came with. So then again, we were economically exploited for that. And still to this day, Black people only make up 13% of the population, the total population in Ohio. I'm pretty sure it's sometimes the same percent, a similar percentage in those two neighboring states, in Missouri and in Maryland. I'm guaranteed it's probably about the same. But out of like 10 million people that are in this state, only 13% are Black. We have no chance here. We never had a chance here. This is why I created the Black Owned and Controlled movement. So moving forward, that hit us. The mass migration hit us. We lost soldiers. We lost participants in the community. We lost producers inside of our community and our heartlands in the South. The next thing, Jim Crow. So in 1881, Jim Crow was established in Tennessee. And do I have who? Nope, I don't. I forgot. I think there was a name of a guy in Tennessee who actually started the Jim Crow movement, and not movement, but travesty in history. And on top of that, the Ku Klux Klan was things was getting out of control. Let me see what we got here. Yeah. So Jim Crow. So this is the third phase of slavery. Sharecropping was not working out as well as they thought it would. Gave Black people a little bit too much leeway. We had a bunch of revolts. We had all these political standings. All this stuff was going on. It was just getting wild. And in Tennessee, they said, you know what? We gonna deal with this. We gonna deal with these niggas. We got y'all. And they created Jim Crow, where legal, federal, legal discrimination was instituted, where they say, okay, well, Black people done succeeded in making their own little epochs in their own little communities. They keep running away. There wasn't enough slave owners to go back and catch all these slaves, and sometimes when they was going to chase them, the slave owners was getting killed because there's 10 slaves that ran away, and there's 2 white guys on horses. They're gonna lose that battle, and it was just starting to get unsustainable. So they went to the government and said, okay, I got you niggas. We're going to choke y'all out. So since we started to be a whole lot rebellious and we were being successful at it, they turned off the lights. That's what Jim Crow was. They turned off the lights. They turned off the water. They turned off everything. So they cut off complete and total. They legally cut off complete and total access to the resources that we would need in order for us to be independent. They cut it off. And if they caught you trying to, y'all know the stories. Y'all seen the pictures. Y'all know what's going on. Y'all know once they had the white area and the black area. And they had the white water fountain and the black water fountain. The white water fountain pumps Kool-Aid. The black water fountain don't even have a line. It was nothing in the law that would stop if some white dude just came and just put a hole in the pipe, in the water pipeline, in the water line that would put water in our water fountain. Nothing in the law that was illegal for him to do that. And for no reason could you go and use that white water fountain. So this is what Jim Crow did. It reinstituted legal slavery, legal discrimination. It spread throughout the racist Democratic South, the Confederacy. It spread all throughout doing it. And this way, blacks would have to come back to master and beg master for, for some water, beg master for some food. They would take control of all of the public spaces. Um, um, Even plantations, they couldn't even get a job without registering. And then and when they did register and they were hired to work on this property, it would be 100% along the terms of the plantation owner. Okay, well, sharecropping, you was given 1%, I'm gonna give you 0.3% now, since y'all think y'all gonna be free. Yeah, they played these kind of games in Jim Crow, and then the racist Democratic South helped create the Ku Klux Klan, a paramilitary, a paramilitia who would basically terrorize the black community. And no black person should ever go around saying vote or die. Puff Daddy was tricked. I'm talking about, I really wish I could sit down and have a conversation with the brother. He was tricked into this whole vote or die thing. I don't know where he got this. I hope it wasn't no conspiracy to go against black people. And all the evidence points towards it, because he ain't doing nothing for black people with his $500 million. Nothing. So the Ku Klux Klan was losing too much support to the Republican Union North and the racist Democratic Confederate South was losing too much support to the racist Republican Union North. And they said, okay, we got them. So they created the Ku Klux Klan because they were not getting federal resources that they needed to legally police and discriminate against black people. So they said we do it on our own. This is why when we see a whole bunch of gun-toed white guys who even to this day, they pulled in that same spirit. The government's going to take our rights, and they're going to take our guns first, and then they're going to take our rights. This is where that whole idea came from. When you hear that, something wakes up in your soul that say, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. So they took it among themselves. This is why the Second Amendment was so important. This is why the Second Amendment was so important to white folks, because not that they're trying to do it now. Sometimes it seems like it, but they can't get it off. It's a wrap. We didn't already made ourselves too strong. They couldn't get it off. But in those days, they used the Second Amendment right to carry guns and do whatever they wanted to do. And the Second Amendment says that they can even check the government if the government get out of control. So they were using this as legitimacy. This is why, once again, I do not trust the government, because they legalize all of this discrimination. And black people are fools, complete and total fools to trust these people when it's a clear obvious. I'm making it clear and obvious that the racism is systemic. So they use the Ku Klux Klan to round us up and force us to vote for them. So they killed you, they maimed you, they hung you. Y'all know the story. Y'all seen the pictures. We don't have to go down that line. Y'all know what the Ku Klux Klan stands for. Y'all know what it is. So this all was created to keep black people in check. That went on for a whole nother 100-something years. That was that period went from 1881 to 1954, when it was actually legally abolished. And we fought for our rights from the early 1900s up until this day. So now we enter the early 1900s, when so many black movements was coming along. Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King, the most notable. So we had all these different movements to try to establish black independence. And as we know, which is the next point, and what happened to black people. Mind you, up until this point, we're about $500 trillion behind. No education, no social progression, and no economic structural progression. We're just literally the dogs of white people in this country. Literally. So in the early 1900s, brothers started to stand up. They took the little bit that we were given to be able to work in the North. Especially the movements popped off in the North with the Nation of Islam and the brothers in Chicago. And mind you, Elijah Muhammad, um, he migrated out of Georgia. He's from Georgia. He migrated out of Georgia to go to the North once he was discriminated against and put in jail and all this. So where there was a little bit more opportunity, blacks got smart and we started organizing ourselves and making the best out of our own little niche communities that we were forced to stay in because white people still ain't want to live with us and be around us, which is the next point. And all the black movements popped off. When all the black movements popped off, we was able to unify up under the leadership of the great Malcolm and the great Martin. And once it seems like we were on the brink of establishing our own everything, and we were going to once, for the first time in American history, be considered equal, be equal, stand side by side, white people in this country, and not be up under white people, subjugated in this country for the first time in 300 some odd years with a $500 trillion bill. We behind $500 trillion. Once it seemed like that was going to succeed, yours truly, your government, your racist Democratic government whacked everybody that had something to do with it. They whacked JFK for even talking to Martin Luther King, just like how they did with what's his face, Abraham Lincoln. They whacked him. Then they went whacked Malcolm, Rahimahumullah, in '65, and then they whacked Martin in '68. Our two leaders, our two hopes. They are the ones they could have been. They could have literally been the first black president and first black vice president, and vice versa. They could have switched places, and we could have had 16 years of rule at that time. Could have helped us out with Malcolm and Martin's plan. Resources would have been redistributed and redirected into the black community. White people did not want to see that. They wanted to remain supreme. This is what white supremacy is. They wanted to remain supreme, and your racist democratic government, Confederate government, conspired to once again knock us off our axis and put us back another few hundred years when they killed Malcolm and Martin. Those were the most popular, and let me not forget, the great Nat Turner. They executed publicly the great Nat Turner. They did the same thing with Marcus Garvey, did the same thing with Malcolm, and they did the same thing with Martin. Whacked all of our significant black leaders and let us know you will never gain freedom in this country. That was just in '68. That was one generation ago, a generation and a half ago from now. That was not that long ago. So let's move forward to number 5. In the early 1900s, up until I don't know how long it lasted. I believe about 50 years. Excuse me. Alhamdulillah. So for about 50 years, the federal government established the HOLC, what does that stand for? The Homeowners Loan Corporation, and they established the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration. Now black people are making money, they get jobs. It's the early 1900s. They're doing a little bit of something. And mind you, the political scene, they're pushing back and forth for black rights and human rights. And then also I forgot to mention that the first Civil Rights Act was passed in the late 1800s also, but it was never upheld. It was never upheld. So they were struggling back and forth politically. And in the meantime, between time, black people got to work. We quit asking them for stuff. We started mobilizing our own community. We got to work. So we started getting a little bit of freedom. We started making a little bit of progression. Desegregation came in 1964, and black people were permitted to live. Jim Crow was put out, and black people were permitted to live alongside white people. What was this going to do? This could have possibly tipped the scale. This could have possibly made black people equal, which white people didn't want. The racism was the that they deserve to have all of the luxuries of this life, and black people don't. So racism just kind of spread through as a culture in white society. So even though the government was working to undo that and to the worst interpretation of it, if white people on the ground were accustomed to their good living and they didn't want to let go of the wealth and resources that they accumulated off the backs of black people up until that time. So they didn't want to be around us anymore. So once we started to move to their neighborhoods and migrate, and it was legal now, so we can move to the suburbs or we can move to a nice area in the city. We just have to work hard enough, get us a little job, and boom, and that's it. Bam! The government, the systemic racism in the government, created the HOLC and the FHA, where they attacked black people. This is economic terrorism. They attacked black people, and basically they created what you call redlining, where they looked at where all the black people had migrated to from the South. First, they looked at all the black areas of the South where slaves were, drew a red line around that. Looked at all the migrated areas that they had went to across the country. Boom, red line around that. And they purposely devalued those communities first. Then second, they started to give loans to white people, only white people, so that they can, own property and go and develop undeveloped areas in the woods, and which what we call now the suburbs. And third, they prohibited black people from getting these loans and getting this progression. Now that's just completely backwards. The people who needed that help, that federal help, were the ones who have been subjugated and have a $500 trillion debt with the government. That's who needed it, not them, us. So this knocked us back another probably 150 years, because the number one form of wealth is home ownership and land ownership. Number one form of wealth. 40% of people's net income, it comes through their home, their land. Even if we weren't given reparations, if things was made fair, we could somehow, some way work our way up out of this thing. But now that they put that power play down, which lasted a generation. So in my grandmother's era, this happened. She was prohibited from doing this. So that means she had nothing. All she did, all she worked, and everything that she ever lived for, she couldn't pass it down to my mama and my uncles and aunties, and they couldn't pass it down to me. So now what does this leave? This makes crack babies. This makes the crack era, which is the next thing I didn't get to put it inside of my bulletin, but that was the next thing that happened. Once they finished with the housing discrimination, once they finished with that, they looked at the black communities again. They said every generation, they have to do something to us. Every single generation, they got to do something cataclysmic that'll knock us way far back and keep them way far ahead. They hit us with the crack and heroin epidemic, the drug epidemic. They flooded our communities with drugs. Our communities were owned by us. It was ran by us. They could not allow that. So from the 70s, from the 60s to the 80s, we were doing our own thing. We didn't need white people. We was like, all right, that's cool. Y'all wearing black suits. We gonna wear pink and red and purple suits. This was the whole so-called pimp and player era. We had our own thing. That's where the word flavor came in. Matter of fact, my uncle, may Allah give him some type of respite in the hereafter. His name, he was a pimp. His name was Flavor. We put our own on everything. Let me sidebar. Now we have assimilated with white culture, and that just gave away everything that was great that we ever did and worked for. We just like Lil Wayne, sold all of his rights to all of his work, his legacy, everything that he has. He can't even pass nothing down to his children. And I know, one of his baby mamas, I went to school with her, and I used to date her. I know her. She ain't gonna get nothing. Whatever. Now he already proved that he's a fool. So he got everybody like he got the 100 million. A lot of that's getting sucked up into debt and a whole bunch of other stuff. And this dude is still doing foolish things. I don't know if any significant investments that he made. He already 38 years old, so it's kind of time is kind of behind him for him to be able to invest in something and get a solid return on it that would be equal to what his legacy was in music. We just completely assimilated. We let them take everything from us. So from the 60s and the 80s, we established our own thing. We owned all the corner stores. We owned our own car lots. We owned our own house. It wasn't much, but it was ours. That's a foundation. That's a stepping stone for us to get up to where we need to be. What they do, boom, they flood drugs into the community. They sucked all of the resources dry in black communities, inflated the cost of living again, which everybody knows. You got a white landlord, you don't own that. You got a white landlord. If you was to sell the house might be on the national market or in the local market. It's probably worth $50,000, and they charge you $120,000 for it. That's still going on to this day. So if you did own your house, you did really well, and you overpaid, which knocked off a lot of the other monies that you might have been able to have, and decrease your net wealth so that you can't pass nothing on to your next generation. They making sure and keep it inside of their progeny and their generation. So y'all know what the 80s and the 90s was. This is to the present day. Y'all know what the 80s and the 90s was. Just war inside of our own community. And we are still in that state to this day. No jobs in the black community, no business ownership in the black community, no home ownership in the black community, nothing. No education in the black community. None of this. All of this, all these six things that seven things, and I'm going to mention the eighth thing, which is the last one. All this stuff created the climate, the what we live in today. How in the world can we become equal? Can we establish ourselves if we are behind $500 trillion, and every time it seems like we got a shimmer of hope and light that we were going to be free? Boom! Here comes some other government conspiracy to knock blacks back. Fast forward to the most recent systemic conspiracy against black people, the 2008, up under yours truly, Obama's nose, the subprime mortgage crisis. So we had a black president, and I don't know if he was for us or for against us. It looked like he was for them and against us. Uh, that's just what it looks like. We got to look at his statistics. This was the hopeful quarterback that we had for the black team, and he ain't do nothing but when he got in the game, he ain't do nothing but throw interceptions. So, yeah, we proud that we had a black quarterback that played in the Super Bowl or whatever, but he ain't do nothing but throw interceptions, and he did not win the game. He did not win the championship. That means that he was not the best player. We were not the best team. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. I'm sorry. Look at his statistics. Nothing he did worked. All he did is a bunch of deflecting stuff. And this happened. They had trick. We still can't get to the bottom of who did what, and he did not try to get to the bottom of who did what in the subprime mortgage crisis. That's a whole study by itself. But the black people were hit the hardest. Our homes were foreclosed on much more at a much higher rate than white homes were. So we already don't have nothing. We already $600 trillion behind. We got a civil war between Bloods and Crips and GDs and Vice Lords, all fighting for what little bit of money that is in the ghetto. We got no jobs, so we got to go out to the jobs in the white communities where they don't want us to take over theirs or to beat them out of anything. So as opposed to, they pay Tom $20 an hour, and they pay Tyrone $12 an hour. We dealing with this still to this day. We got all of this going on, and boom, here they go. They hit us again, hit us in the mouth again with the home ownership thing. So basically, all these swanky racist institutions and racists inside of those institutions trick black people into thinking that they can get a refinance loan with a lower rate when it was really a compounding higher rate. Sometimes they say that the interest rates tripled. Uh, they inflated they inflated the interest rates, tricked you into signing it up, got a bunch of people up under that, and they actually, matter of fact, were giving not Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo was giving cash incentives for what they on record called ghetto loans. Ghetto loans. This is what they call it. They say ghetto loans to the mud people. This just happened in 2008, 2009, and 11. That just happened. They got cash incentives to basically trick black people, trick them so they doctor up all the paperwork, make it look good, bundled all these things together. They were not prime mortgages, which is ideal for a bank to loan to. They were subprime mortgages. Gathered them all together, sold them on the world market in bundles. The debt might have been worth $5 million. Say, hey, we're selling on the world market for $3 million. Got all these national and international investors. They took advantage of this because the housing market had went down and the home values had decreased. But we all know that stuff goes back up. There was a lot of different economic factors that came into play. So big time investors like, shoot, man, and everybody's struggling for some money. They selling all these mortgage packages, man. I'm gonna get me one, and when the market go back up, if I bought one for $3 million, it'd be back. When the market go back up, it'd be worth $8 million. Who wouldn't do that? It all hit the fan. Some good white people started to tell what was going on. They call them whistleblowers. We call them snitches and rats. They started to tell what was going on. Federal people started investigating. They seen that this was the truth. And one example, I watched a video, and there was a brother in Georgia. He had worked at the post office. He didn't make so much, but he only made so much money at the post office. Old brother, So he never paid off his home loan, which was already inflated. Then some bank people hit him up and was like, hey, you can refinance at a lower rate, and then that could bring down your payments. Paying it off was not even in question. But to bring down his payments, and then he was retired on top of that, so he only had a fixed limited income. It was like, all right, cool, I'll do that. So boom, he sold that, but then the inside of the paperwork, it was the interest was supposed to compound. Or I still don't know how they got that off, but they sold it and got him to sign the paperwork for 2%, and for whatever stipulations that was inside of the invisible writing at the bottom of the contract, they said if not this XYZ, it'll turn into 12%. So that happened. That 12% activated, and he was like, "Whoa, hold up! Y'all told me 2%. How are y'all doing?" And they was like, "Hey, it's in the contract. They duped us, tricked us again." Next thing you know, he can't pay his mortgage. So he go behind. It's in the invisible writing at the bottom of the contract that if you get behind X amount of days, boom, we get to take your house. Next thing you know, his house gets took. This happened wide scale or in the black community. And I read also this happened only to 6% of houses in white families who have a 75% home ownership percentage, when black people have only a 30-some odd percent of homeowner percentage, and we lost 21% of our houses to the subprime mortgage crisis, and that just domino effect all of our wealth, all of our net worth, all of our wealth, everything we worked for from slavery times all the way to now. We done made it. We done moved up on the east side. I own a house. I got me a job paying $30,000 a year. I drive me an old Lexus. All of that just got knocked off with that one move. And black wealth nationally after the subprime mortgage scheme, I ain't gonna call it a crisis, scheme, black people lost half of their wealth, half of their net value, which is non-existent in and of itself, but they lost half of it. This is unbelievable. This is uncanny. So I'm gonna close up the presentation. Y'all can see that the conditions, that the suffering that we are in today was orchestrated. These people are not dumb. They are very smart. They knew what they were doing. Just like the banksters, and with the subprime mortgage crisis, they knew who this was going to affect. They knew who it was going to affect, and they did nothing. They let it happen. They didn't care that it happened. Doesn't make any sense. This right here shows and it proves what that there's been systemic oppression since day one for black people in this society. Systemic oppression, which means that we can't walk around saying, oh, we're not educated enough, we don't work hard enough, nor do we save enough money. There's no work, there's no money, and there's no education to save. They took it all from us and created the oppression that we have now. They took it all from us by force. We have to stop believing we are at fault for this. And we have to stop believing that if we just work hard enough, it's going to make things better. That ain't doing nothing but making them richer because we don't own or control any of the things that we are producing. Any of it. I don't care what it is. 98% of the market is owned by white people, 98 plus percent. We have to change that. This is the history of why things is the way that it is. So let this educate you and activate you. We have to stop believing that we're free. We are not. We are in cyber sharecropping. That's where we at today. And this proves it. So I'm gonna wrap this part of the presentation up and we're gonna close out, inshallah. So all in all, we have to first and foremost abandon the mentality of we don't work hard enough, we're not educated enough, nor have we saved enough money, or even when people say, excuse me, or even when people say we what do you call it, we party too much, or even though we do, but even none of those factors, none of those single factors, or even all of them together, will amount to the 600 trillion, 500 trillion, 600 trillion dollar debt. If those numbers are correct, please don't quote me on those numbers. I'm just kind of guesstimating at how astronomical the wealth gap actually really is. It's not the current 171,000 to the 17,000, 171,000 whites and blacks, 17,000 estimate. It's not that. It's much, 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 much larger than that. And that's, we got a lot of efforts going on. We got a lot of black, beautiful black scholars out there. Yvette Carnell, my favorite, Dr. Boyce Watkins, my second favorite, Dr. Claude Anderson. Shout out to Powernomics and shout out to Dr. Boyce Watkins. Shout out to Yvette Carnell, Breaking Brown. I love her show. Shout out to Dr. Boyce Watkins. He inspired me when I came home from 10 years of prison to start my own business. And like he always says, get off of the economic plantation. Get off of his plantation and become, independent, become an owner in your own right. And you can do it. If I come home from 10 years of prison with literally no education and I can start my own black business, and we all could do it, which is what I want to establish with the black owned and controlled movement. We all, the thing is about having so many scholars is that, we spread out, like I pointed out in the presentation. We spread out all over the place too thin. We got a decent population in Baltimore, not in Maryland. We got a decent population in New York, New York City, not New York State. We got a decent population out in Cali, not the whole Cali. We got a decent population in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I'm from, but not the whole state. We got strongholds in Cincinnati in the south, and then Cleveland up in the north, and that's it. Some, a little bit in between Columbus, so. But throughout the whole picture and the whole spectrum, we outnumbered, we outgunned, we outmanned, however you want to play it. We are playing the game. We playing the game. Like if you take football, we got 6 or 7 players at any given time on the field, while they got 11 and 12 players on the field. We have no coach. They have a league of coaches. We need to consolidate. This is what black owned and control is about. The consolidation of our best resources, which is the human resource. And everything else, well, I can calculate that everything else will just naturally begin to come together. Once we consolidate, then we can concentrate / pool our resources from human all the way down to natural. We have so much intelligence. We have so much greatness that we can and have already offered the world. Now we need to take that out, withdraw that from empowering them. And I hate to use those terms, us and them, but that's just the way that the cookie crumbles. That's just reality. We don't live in this beautiful idea of America where it's equality for all and it's a melting pot and everybody has equal opportunity. This is the crap that they preach to us as children, and then still have us believe we got black people fighting each other that the of the false reality that we all have equal opportunity. We don't. I just proved it. If anybody disagrees with that presentation, you are not black. Yes, I said it. If Joe Biden can say it, then I can say it. You are not black. That's systemic racism and oppression throughout the whole entire history of African Americans, or ADOS, we would like to call it nowadays, is established, and this is the reason why we are behind. We need to withdraw from their systems. They own 98+% of all the wealth, own and control all 98% of all the wealth in this country. We need to withdraw from being mass producers of wealth and power to them, and they're not returning those favors to us. First and foremost, there is no black community. There are black people that exist within the white community, but there is no black community. We have, we all spread out. If we concentrate ourselves in this area, and if y'all got a better idea, my idea is Atlanta, Georgia, because we're already doing the best all the way around the board. There are I'm not saying that we don't do better or as well in other places, but when you look at the array of progression that black people have made in Atlanta, Georgia, for a lot of reasons, that's the roots. That was one of the first places where black people, when we were released from slavery, that was one of the first places we migrated to. We were already there, first and foremost, in Georgia. Atlanta was one of the first places where black people settled and started doing their own thing. Even though, we've been knocked back, a lot with all those factors that I mentioned in the presentation, but the Atlantans, they have figured out some kind of way to survive. And as opposed to trying to reinvent the wheel, if we go join the show, they already got a predominantly black area. They already have predominantly black everything. We all need to take our greatness that we established. Not we all. I know we all ain't going to do it, but most of us, I would say at best, need to migrate to Atlanta. We still formulating the plan, and I'm going to reveal it as we go and we get it together. And then that way we can completely color one area. We can start there. We color one area. We take control of our own everything. That's what black owned and control is about. Taking control of our own destiny. We can end the police shooting. We can end mass incarceration. We can begin to close the wealth gap because we would make our own economy and our own systems and support our own selves as opposed to continuously working and slaving in an economy that basically furthers and pushes white supremacy. Because they own and control everything. Once we establish our own economy, we will be contributing to that. Now, it's still a offshoot because overall we would be still contributing to the white power structure that's already in play. But we can at least cut that in half. We can at least cut that in half by having our own land, having our own space for us to operate inside of, creating our own local economy. And Atlanta is big enough. Georgia is big enough. Well, if this thing can take fire, inshallah, and we can overpopulate and dominate the metro Atlanta area, which is made up of 5 major counties, there are neighboring cities to Atlanta that we can continue to spill out over into, and then the state of Georgia itself. And then once we can be successful at owning and controlling this one area for our own good sake, not for war or anything like that, because I know the FBI is watching, but just to fire the FBI, to fire the police, fire the FBI, fire the local politicians. not done right by us ever in this whole in the whole history of things, and nobody can disagree with that. We just want, like my brother Bilal Strauss said, we just want a divorce. We just want y'all to leave us alone. Let us do our own thing. Let us love and build amongst our own selves. Just allow us to have that. Just allow us to have that. Once we can, become successful in that area, I think Georgia and Atlanta, Georgia, is the most, is the best soil for this seed to be planted in. We can reach out and branch out into all of the neighboring significant black cities and almost states: South Carolina, North Carolina, New Orleans, Louisiana, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Maryland. We can branch out. We can do it even maybe if we don't decrease the participation in Cincinnati. Cincinnati got almost 40% black people in it. Devastatingly poor, but because we outnumbered and we don't share interests, we still segregated and outnumbered and don't share interests with the white people. So they got all the money, we don't, which is why I got to get up out of there. We got to go somewhere where I will progress, where people have my same interests. That's what it's all about. So I'm gonna close this up, and if I said anything wrong, please, in the comments, email, however we can get in contact. I'm on Facebook, Black Owned and Controlled. I'm on Facebook. My personal page is Abdul Kabir Muhammad, and we are on Instagram, Black Owned and Controlled. Definitely, y'all watching this on YouTube. We on Twitter, Black Owned and Controlled. Get in contact with me. I want to hear people's thoughts, people's feedback. This is just my hard work and my contribution to the struggle. If there's another place where we can go and we can migrate to, overpopulate that land and have our own land and start doing our own thing. If there's another place, y'all let me know. Bring me numbers, bring me the statistics, bring me all of the logistics, and we can get it popping. I'll stand corrected and I'll move in the direction of who's correct. There's a lot of scholars out here, and we need to all come together. We need to consolidate. That's a must. That's what Black Owned and Controlled is about. So I'm gonna wrap this up, and may Allah Ta'ala bless everybody that is in the struggle. May Allah Ta'ala bless the whole entire world and give us peace and prosperity. We just want to, live in peace and worship how we worship, work how we work, and do what we do. That's all we want. I'm gone. I love y'all for the sake of Allah. كل قول هذا وأستغفر الله ولا إله إلا الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله